I am Jodee Simpson. I am an autistic speech and language therapist. I work for Catalyst Care Group. We are a mental health social care. Like I have to remember what we are. Um, we are a social care provider within the mental health and learning disability kind of settings. Okay. And those of you, some of you may have already heard my colleague Amy speak this morning. So if you had, you might have had like the full information about who catalysts are. Right. So I'm really pleased that you've invited me today to come and speak. I'm going to be speaking to you about pain and autism, and I will put a little bit of my lived experience in there because I do tend to, I can't help it, I do tend to do that. I'm going to ask Katie to keep me on track because my timekeeping is absolutely terrible, and I do tend to go off piste because I'm very passionate about what I do, and I have a huge amount of knowledge in my head that I just really enjoy info dumping on everybody. So I've actually written myself a script today just to try and keep myself on track. Okay, because last time I only got halfway through my slides. Right. So please, is the chat turned on for people? Right. Katie, I'm going to ask you, well, Katie and Ian, if you can keep an eye on the chat for me and just give me like if there's like a really important question that you think, actually, I think we need to answer this question now, then please do. Otherwise, we are aiming to have at least 10 minutes at the end where you can ask some questions. And I can't multitask, so I will not be able to read your questions as they're coming through, okay? That's just one of my needs, so I'm going with it, all right? Okay, so I love this, the way that slides through there. Right, what to expect. Whenever I deliver training, I always usually take, and this is a thing with not being here in person, is that you won't benefit from all of the things that I bring for people to have like a little play with, because I know it's really hard doing webinars because you're sitting down all day making notes. You might be multitasking and writing a report alongside it as well. But you know, we all have needs. So you might need to fidget, you might need to move around, you might need to stim. You know, I'll have things, and you may see me. I won't do that one though because it's too noisy. You know, I may be fidgeting, and I might be moving around a bit, and then if I get really fidgety, I might just get out of my chair and do my desk up, okay, and move around. But that's okay. That's just, you know, do whatever you need to do. I do expect you to participate. This is my rule, and you might. I think you know, I was an ex-French teacher as well, so this is where that comes in, you know. But thankfully, I can't see if anybody's not paying attention, so nobody will be told off today. So, do ask lots of questions. Do make comments. I love seeing comments as well. If you think something's like, wow, that's amazing. That's totally blown my mind. I've not thought about it that way. Or, yes, I recognize that. I've seen that in people. You know, put it in there because like later I'll have a like good look through all of them. And it will really cheer me up. Okay, so right, I always start off with a little bit about me because I think it's really important that whenever you listen to speakers that you kind of know who they are, because to you, you know, I've never spoken at this conference before. You know, because I'm a speech and language therapist, I worked in the NHS before. You know, I haven't been working in these circles. So as far as you're concerned, I am a complete nobody. Yeah, I'm new to you. Okay, so I think it's really important that you just understand a little bit about my story, because that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm coming from and the experience that I'm bringing here, and why I'm going to say why I deserve to be here as a speaker. Okay, so apart from, you know, being autistic, because that's really cool. So I am autistic, I have ADHD, and I also have complex PTSD. It's kind of similar to PTSD, except it's much, much worse. And I would also consider myself as neuroqueer. So I'm gender non-conforming, sexuality non-conform. I'm not quite sure yet. I haven't quite figured it out, which is why I use queer there. So I've put them, my pronouns are she, they, but I'm going more towards they, them at the moment. So if you see anything written about me, or you do want to share, you know, if you go on, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Twitter. Well, I'm trying to come off Twitter. You know, do tag me and you'll find me just with my name on there. If I ask very politely if you use they, them pronouns, I would really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to actually go back and read my script, which is why I'm here. Right. So we all have intersecting identities that influence how we see and understand and interact with the world around us. I'm an autistic speech and language therapist and a former teacher, which I've told you already. I have ADHD and complex PTSD. But in primary school, I was actually bottom of the class, and I didn't even read fluently till I was nearly a teenager. But I'm now on my third degree. So it actually turns out that I'm very clever. I had an IQ test about 10 years ago, and it turns out that I'm actually in the superior range. But actually, nobody noticed that when I was in primary school because of, you know, I was autistic and people didn't have high expectations for me. But I created this image that you see on here, the one with the head and all the sparkly lights, because this is really a picture of the inside of my head. I've always got there's always a lot of buzzing going on in my head. It's often really lovely buzzing, but it's buzzing that notices all the details around me. So the sensory details, that, you know, all sorts of different details, and it doesn't filter out any of it. It's constantly thinking. My brain is always analysing something, and it's finding wonderful patterns in the most unlikely places. Now, I'm not alone in this, because actually a lot of the people that we work with also have brains that work like this. But there's my not always have a brain that lights up and glows with the hum of joyful activity. Sometimes that hum becomes very dark and spirals. So my next page is, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to read, I do a mental health and poetry blog. I've probably given you a spoiler there, but the link for it will be right at the end of this. There's loads of like fabulous poems, but mostly they will make you cry. Okay. But I'm going to read one of my poems, and I just want you to, in the chat, just put in the chat what you think I'm talking about. Okay, what do you think I'm describing? Oh, by the way, if you recognise this picture, which you should do if we've got lots of Scottish people joining us, there's a clue. You get bonus points for naming where this is. Okay, Simpson points. Okay, so okay, some days when I wake, my head is full of turbulent noise. I avoid giving it any sort of attention, even less to mention that it's making me feel like nothing is actually real. The surreal appeal of my freewheeling focus, its locus roaming, unable to wield any signal in this foggy, static cloud. Vibrating turbines resonantly humming their blades, drumming my body, suspended in orbit in the gap between reality and landing not permitted, circling on hold, unable to ground until the interfering electrical storm has cleared and the heavy congestion in my head lifted. Only then can my control tower call me into land, an uneasy grounding onto the runway of my day ahead. Don't be influenced by the fact that this conference is called Could It Be Pain? Could it be pain? What have we got in the chat then? Are people putting things, Katie?
People are, so we've got...
Yeah, because I'm avoiding having the chat so I don't get distracted.
We've got disassociation or anxiety.
Ooh. Yeah.
Being overwhelmed, making decisions, recovering from sensory overwhelm, anxiety, waking, a migraine, pain, anxiety, confusion, just waking up,
Yes. Ugh.
monotropism, how you feel
Ooh,
every day.
bonus points for that. Who was that that said
Monitor
monotropism?
was Callum.
Well done, Callum.
We've got everyday start, so just that process of waking up.
Everyday start.
We also did
Oh,
have one
I hope
person
you
who
don't have
recognised the
that every
picture
day when you wake up. It's awful. Or
at the
isn't it? Or
National
is it
Museum of
awful?
Scotland.
And where do we think it was?
So we've
Who
had one
thinks?
person have a go, and they've
Go
said
on
the
then.
National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh.
Bonus points. 10 Simpson
That was
points to
it.
you. And we'll have 5 points to Callum for monotropism, because I love that word. If you don't know what monotropism means, go and look it up, because it will, words like that get you points, Simpson points. Right, so absolutely right. This is the National Museum of Scotland, which is in Edinburgh. I did go and visit it. It's a beautiful museum. I had a massive panic attack when I went in there. And what I've just described to you, actually, what I described to you is actually the morning after the first time I took antidepressants. That was what that poem was. But I actually experienced very similar feeling when I was in that museum. So at the time, I was just having a big shutdown, meltdown. I burst into tears. I was feeling really overwhelmed. Um, I couldn't find. I was just looking for those tiny chess pieces. You know, the ones that are in the Harry Potter movie that make the big. They're in there from the one of those little islands where they dug it up in Scotland. Anyway, absolutely fascinating. That's all I wanted to see. Was completely overwhelmed by how many like things there are in there, and the ADHD was like, oh, I don't know where to look. But anyway, it turns out that the reason that I had a meltdown was because it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I hadn't even remembered to eat. So the reason that I had a meltdown was not because, well, it was partly because the noise in there is so echoey that it was a bit too much. I mean, it wasn't even, this was busy. The picture on here was busier than it was. There was hardly anybody in there, but I still felt overwhelmed. There was too much information there. I couldn't find what I needed. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't know where these little men were. I was not expecting them to be in the ancient Scottish history part. But it was actually hunger, which I hadn't noticed that had actually caused it. And also my legs were really, really aching because I'd already walked 6 miles. So I think that might have contributed to a bit of pain. And I didn't notice that I had pain until I sat down and had a cup of coffee and something to eat. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Okay, I'm telling you this because actually, as an autistic person, I find it very difficult to know. And an autistic person that, yes, was bottom of the class, that, yes, didn't speak very much in primary school, but turns out is actually very clever. But even with all of that, I still didn't recognise that I was definitely overdue lunch by at least 2.5 hours, that I was in pain, and I didn't really understand my sensory needs back then either. And that was only it was only 2 years ago. Okay, so let's come on, move this one. There we go. Okay, a little bit of interaction for you there. If you have, this isn't going to work if you're on your phone, but I tell you what I'll do. What I want you to do is, if you're watching this on your laptop and you've got your phone with you, scan the QR code and have a little go at that. You know what I should have done, Katie? I should have sent you all these before. I would have sent you all these before, but obviously because of everything that didn't happen before. Let me see if I can find it. High pain thresholds. Here we go. Collect responses. Copy link. Let's put it in the chat. And then anybody that's on their phone that you can't scan a code while you're looking at it on your phone, can you? Right, chat. Ugh. I hate multitasking. This is so hard for me. I find it so hard doing this. Right, it's in the chat.
You're doing great, Jodie. Let me know if you need me to do anything for you in the background as well. But yeah, I can see the link now. That's fab. Thank you.
Tell you what, while people are doing that, I'll get the next one loaded up and then... Right, I'm going to put the next one in the chat. No, actually, I'll put it in the chat ready to go and then I'll press send.
Jodie, sorry to interrupt you. I think a lot of people are saying that they're following the link, but they don't have permission to view it.
Ugh. Right.
Oh, is that who did it?
Okay, let me just let me go back into it then and change that. Right, collect responses. Anyone can respond. It doesn't require sign-in. I don't know why it's doing that. I don't actually know what I can do if it says anybody can respond.
Yes, I'm not sure myself there, Jodie. Sorry.
No. Well, if you can't join it, then we won't be able to see the fancy stuff that comes next. But what you can do is just you can put your answers in the chat.
Okay.
What do you think? See, nobody's got on, so
Okay. So
there's no point in me leaving it on here
a
because you won't be able to see it anyway.
few people are saying false. We've had a comment saying some people have a low registration of pain, others have a high registration of pain, and isn't sensory based on how you feel. Couple of trues, but I think predominantly false coming through.
Okay. Right, we're going to. I'm not going to give you the answer straight away because that would just be too clever, wouldn't it? And actually, like the person that said, depends, Millie. Thank you. Actually, yeah, it can depend because actually we're all individuals, aren't we? And some people have high pain thresholds for some things. Like you think about. I know, like, when after I had children, I compared my birthing stories to other people. Like, lots of people had different experiences of whether that felt painful or not. Okay. Oh, if there's any men in here, or birth is always painful. Okay. Don't ever think that it's not painful.
Disclaimer. Disclaimer.
Just in case you were wondering that it might be easy. Okay, so first of all, before I answer this, because there isn't actually a straightforward answer, because it's actually a lot more complicated. Okay, so I need to read this one now because what I did was I made your slides so much easier to look at by removing all of the writing. So I'm going to read it. Okay, so what is pain then? Okay, first of all, let's think about what pain is. Pain is complex and it's a subjective experience. Yes, we know that. We know that pain can be physical and it can be emotional. Okay, but how can we tell the difference between emotional pain and physical pain? That wasn't a rhetorical question. You can put your answers in the chat. Because I did say lots of participation.
There is a comment here, Jodie, from Rachel saying that we're all different, but what we have to learn is the name for the feeling. So, for instance, is it pain or is it hunger?
Yes. Rachel, are you autistic yourself? You don't have to answer that in front of everybody, but because that's very insightful. And I expect that that's the type of question. Why is that moving on its own?
Another comment saying it's difficult when physical and emotional pain can be so intimately intertwined. Physical
Yes.
and emotional pain can be both felt through the same pathways? Question mark.
Yes.
Sometimes you've got emotional pain can actually cause physical pain.
Yes, that is true. That is true. That is true.
Symptoms.
We talk about that, an embodied You know, your emotional, you know, if we don't express our emotions, we feel it in our bodies, don't we? Just like when we're getting frustrated with something, we feel the tension in our backs, don't we? Or wherever it is you hold it. Some people, it might be in your jaw because you're like, "Arr." Okay, brilliant. Okay, so, okay, let's go to the next page. Thank you for contributing. Right, how is pain experienced then? So when we look at the research, there's actually kind of like they split pain into two things. We talk about acute pain, which will be the sudden sharp pain. So like I've cut my finger, it's very obvious. It happens very quickly. Ouch, it hurts. Okay. And then you've got your chronic pain, which is your aches and pains. So it might be muscular pain that, you know, because you've been walking too far, or it could be chronic pains that come from like illness or hypermobility joints that are always overstretching and things. And as we get older, um, I don't know about everybody else, but like Katie, you don't look old enough to be at a stage where the
Thanks,
pain's coming
Jodee.
in, or
I
does it? I
definitely
mean,
am.
who knows what? I'm making judgments there based on your age. I've been ageist, but you know, we all have. I remember my grandparents talking about pain and like when you get old, your body creaks, and like I didn't think they actually meant that your body actually creaks. It does actually creak, because like your neck, if you get it in your neck, when you do that, you can hear everything in your neck. You can hear it like rusty ball bearings. Okay, so it's actually true. Your body, well, unless you're really lucky and have a body that's very well oiled, and doesn't creak, but mine certainly does creak now. So those are your two types of pain. Yep, okay. I'm just making sure I've read what's on there because I've kind of gone off piste again. Right, so the body's response to pain then. Okay. Now, this is where the research is really, really helpful. When we have experienced pain, there are lots of things that our body does to show that it's recognized something has happened to your body. There is some pain somewhere. And there are things like your pupils might dilate. Now, you might not see them. They might not go like massive, like puppy dog eyes, but they do dilate a little bit. Your skin may go pale. We may sweat. You know, when you feel a bit clammy, that's actually the body temperature's lowering. So your skin temperature lowers. You may get muscle tension. So, you know, if you've hurt something, you might brace yourself like this. You might be breathing faster. Yeah, obviously I don't know why I demonstrated breathing faster there. You know what that is. You know, your heart rate might start to go up and your blood pressure might increase, or it can lower as well for some people. Now, what they actually found out when they did some research is they actually found that in autistic bodies and in non-autistic bodies, that the body responds in this way exactly the same for everybody. Okay, so your body, so I'm not talking about your head now of you being consciously aware, but your body itself does recognize that there's pain. Now we talk about some people have something called dysautonomia. So that might be one of the questions that people ask. Well, what about people with dysautonomia? So dysautonomia is where your body might do things at strange times. So for example, when I go, I mean, I'm in the stage of my life where I'm perimenopausal now, but I've always had this thing when I've gone from like somewhere cold into somewhere warm, or somewhere warm into somewhere cold, I get, my body goes into excessive amounts of adjustment. And so that's an example of dysautonomia. So it might be, so people that are going through the menopause may experience dysautonomia. That's natural and normal for a lot of female assigned female at birth bodies. But dysautonomia is when it's you might experience that at a much younger age, and it might not just be like a female body, it may be a male body that does those things as well. But the body still responds, okay, to pain. Now, I want you to have a think now. Right, I love this pain scale because they've got on here, they actually put like functioning levels of functioning on it as well. So you know, a lot of pain scales have like, sad face through to happy face, and you've got to, have you been to your doctor or the hospital and they say rate your pain out of 10? Um, so they actually did actually find I always find pain scales really, really difficult to use because I'm like, well, I don't know what I don't know what 10 is. I don't know what 5 is. I don't know, you know. So it just makes me really, really stressed whenever I'm asked this. But I really like this one because actually they kind of like put these functioning scales on the bottom, and they actually they done some studies and they found actually if you ask people how uncomfortable does it feel, that actually it's much more easier to answer. And I thought actually that makes a lot of sense to me because then because if I say it's like 5 out of 10, right, 5 out of 10 on here is interfering with tasks and then working towards interfering with my concentration levels. Well, actually, what I thought I would rate as 5 out of 10, actually, I'm actually at 8 out of 10. Um, so what, just out of interest, what number do you guys tend to, at what point would you like go for the paracetamol? So you can put your answer in the chat. Just out of interest.
I've got a colleague sat next to me who's saying a 6.
A 6?
Sixes and sevens. Some people are saying threes and fours. 8, 6, 7, threes, fours. Really varied, actually. Yeah, so
Yeah, it is really
three's about the
varied, isn't it?
lowest, and up to
Okay. And does your if you're saying, does your 3 out of 10, does it correspond with, because obviously here it says it can't be ignored even from 2, you can't ignore it. But at what point do you tend to notice that you have pain? So that's when you might take your paracetamol, but when would you notice?
notice.
So you
That's probably a
might
little bit
like to
lower.
start with, it's going to be lower, isn't it? Because like
Yeah,
you might notice it first and then you think, I'll just try and distract myself for a bit and see if it
yeah.
just eases off. If I can, I ignore it
So
for a
that's
bit.
varying between a 1 and a 4. Um,
Oh,
I've
that's
got
really interesting.
Thanks for this, Debbie. So Debbie's put in that her 16-year-old daughter is autistic and has a learning disability. She cannot communicate how she feels with words. She has to read a non-verbal communication to sort of anticipate her needs.
Yeah,
It could be really subtle, and only knowing her really well, and basically having best guesses as to what the levels of discomfort
yeah,
and pain and distress are.
yeah,
So that's why obviously she needs to be supported with
yeah.
really well, and that could be really frustrating when
Yeah, totally. Well, I
people
think,
change quickly.
actually, from an observational point of view, do you know, like, does your um does your daughter, do you notice when it's starting to interfere with her everyday life? Is that, could we use a scale like this then to say, well, actually, she can't concentrate on what she's doing. She's pacing up and down. So
Yeah,
we might be able to guess that they're at this level.
she is.
Yeah. So I mean that I think that can help other people. It can help us when we're observing somebody that's not always able to tell us.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I often don't actually notice that I'm in pain till I get to about 7 or 8. So I don't notice it. Now, and my son is the same actually. He's autistic too, and he's also clever like me, but he's like, we thought, well, like I was told, autistic people have high pain thresholds, so I just thought he doesn't feel pain. But now that he's much older and I can chat with, I'm like, look, I'm like waving my hand towards the PlayStation over there. He's not there right at the minute, thankfully, because he would just be distracting me. But that's where I remember having this conversation with him. That actually, for him, um, he doesn't express that he has pain until it's got, like, he cut his head open, had a really bad concussion, didn't tell anybody. and nobody noticed. Well, actually, they did eventually notice. The teacher was sat behind him and thought, how's he got red paint in his hair? And then she thought, hang on a minute, we haven't had the paints out today. And then she put two and two together, and then it turns out, he had fallen over. He'd cut his head open on the side of the, where the edge of the curb. He kind of cut his head open on there. I mean, it's about like a centimetre wide. I hope you've all had your lunch already. It was about a centimetre wide. It was quite deep. It needed stitches. And yeah, but he didn't cry. He just got up and carried on. And so, I'd asked, had the dinner ladies, no, dinner people, the dinner people. I'm making an assumption they're dinner ladies. The dinner people, didn't supervise. That doesn't sound right. The dinner people,
Lunchtime
like I'm going to
supervisors,
eat them,
I believe is what
like
they're
the people that we eat for dinner.
called.
Yeah, so the lunchtime supervisors said that they had seen him fall over and they had looked and seen he got up and he just carried on. So they assumed that, he was fine. So now, if ever he falls over, I'm like, right, I'm checking you down. Have you got any bleeding anywhere? And he's covered in bruises. He falls over every day. Right. So, and he's 19 now. He's still falling over every day. Right. Okay. I have been on this slide for far too long, so I probably need to move on now. So thank you very much for your observations about yourselves and about people that you know. That's really helpful. So let's go to the next page. Right. So pain processing then. Right, pain processing is I've kind of like drawn this little cycle here. There was something I was given and it was a scale going along that way, but I think of it more of like it's more kind of goes round and round. So first of all then, we've in the grey box at the bottom left there, we've got the body. No, not there. We'll start at the top. The body detects pain. So this is your unconscious awareness. This is what we were talking about. Your pupils dilate and you might tense up a little bit, but that's your body's automatic awareness inside of pain, and it may react physiologically by your heart rate and things like that. So it starts pumping your blood around faster because it's noticed there's a tear in your leg, back of your head. So it needs to, do some healing. Okay. But some of the brain studies that they've done and the functional MRI scans, those are slightly different. They're the ones where they put like the electrodes on your head, like a cap on your head with little, and then it kind of like notes whether your brain activities happening. What they noticed is that in autistic brains, there was a much weaker signal going between the part of your brain that registers that something's happening in your body and the part of your brain that tells you as a person, hey up, something's happened here, something's going on, you're in pain. Okay, so you guys, in fact, you guys have already said, most of you have said, it's a 1, 2, maybe a 4 at the very most, that by that time that's your kind of range as a group that you tend to notice that you've got pain. Whereas I'm not alone in this, but the studies that they found is that the autistic brains and autistic bodies, I mean, the bodies notice the pain, but the brains, the heads, the conscious part of our brains doesn't notice it until about 6 or 7 or 8. Okay. Which might be why a lot of the people that we're working with that are autistic or have, let's say, autistic traits, because just because they don't have a diagnosis doesn't mean that they're not autistic. Okay. So they're just because they're not responding, it might just be they're not aware that something's happening in the body. They might not be aware that they've hurt, that something has hurt. They might not notice that their hand is bleeding. Okay, because that signal hasn't got to their brain yet. So it might be for some people, and you will have, you'll have lots of stories of people that you've worked with where you said, actually, they didn't notice for half an hour. And that's when we found out half an hour later. Okay, that's because that signal needed to keep going before the brain picked up, oh, hang on a minute, there is some pain here after all. Okay, but by that time we're on, it's really intolerable, because actually we need that much of a signal before our brains notice, or before our minds notice, that actually something's happening. Okay, now the things that they did find out with these brain imaging studies, that things like light touch can actually have the opposite effect. So to you, light touch, if somebody's like stroking your hand, it can be really pleasant. Or if they like, if you're upset and they just kind of like give you a little pat, it just makes you feel nice. Okay, but for about 50% of autistic people in the studies that they were doing, 50% of autistic people, the light touch actually had the opposite effect. It felt like they were being punched. Okay, so it hurts. And you'll know, I mean, we all work with people that are very touch averse. They don't like to be touched, but want you to do deep pressure on their back, or they're putting things on top of themselves. I think we all know somebody who's constantly under a heavy blanket, or they get the big massive bean bags and they're under the bean bag instead of on top of it. So it's like, yes, I need this deep pressure. Okay, so deep pressure then, so it's a little bit like the pain, actually, because like when I go for a massage, when my masseuse, I think that's what they call them, my massage person does my massage, if they do a nice gentle one, I'm like, no, it's not enough, I need them to go really hard. And she says that I like what she thinks is like a really rough massage, I still feel it is fairly gentle, so I need it much more. Okay, because I need that depth to feel the benefit of it. So the other thing is that they found out is that we're really hyposensitive, so we don't notice as much pinpricks. I don't know why, because like a lot of us are also afraid of needles as well, but they actually don't hurt as much generally. But I don't know, some of the needles that they use are like massive, aren't they? So, a pinprick we think is quite small. So like maybe we don't notice paper cuts quite as much. I know I can quite often get a paper cut and I haven't noticed it, and I'll notice my fingers bleeding. Okay, so after that, so we've got body knows it's in pain. It's giving out a signal. There's pain, there's pain, there's pain, there's pain, there's pain. You guys have already noticed and you've gone and got a hug and that's made you feel better. Or you've put plaster on, you put some cream on, you've taken a pill, you've rubbed something in, you've gone to hospital, and you've noticed that you're in pain and you've done something about it, and now you're starting to feel better. Autistic bodies are still feeling the pain, but they haven't become aware of it yet. Okay, so what they found in research as well is that autistic bodies, even when we do become aware of pain, we're not able to filter out the pain. So I'm going to come to like coping with pain in a minute, so I won't I'll tell you some more about that a bit later. Okay, so when you become consciously aware of pain, we do something about it, don't we? So the body, we'd say we would have a motor response. Yeah, our body responds in order to regulate our pain. So some people might go to a person, like a child might go to their parent or a teacher at school and say, I've hurt myself, make it better. Okay, so that's a child responding. Whereas, if you haven't realized that you're in pain, then you're not going to seek the support, or you're not going to get, whatever you need. Okay, so we've got here then, so because a lot of autistic people take so much longer to recognize they're in pain, that means it's going to impact them now, or impact on them being able to tell somebody else. Now, as a speech and language therapist, I quite often get invited, referrals come in, and I'm asked to assess, I basically, I'm being asked, can you help this person to say when they're not happy? Okay, right. Are they autistic? Yes. Okay. what I'm doing first is I'm looking at on this, where are they on this? You know, do they even notice at all that they're in pain? Because actually, I can't give you any tools to support that person to be more independent and to express that they're in pain if they don't recognize that they're in pain. Because then they're not going to be able to say, they're not going to be able to express the pain because they don't know that they're in pain. Okay. So what can we do? Right, I'm going to have to go really, really fast now because I've just realized like it's 12:43 and I've got a taxi coming at 1 o'clock because we got a little bit muddled up with the timings earlier on. So I'm gonna, do you want to do this or should I just move on?
That's
Yeah,
completely.
I'll just move on. I'll just move on. I was going to get you to interact, but as per usual, I've talked too much already. So, autistic people experience chronic pain at the same rate as non-autistic people. Do they or don't they? Okay, that's a question. Just think about that. Just sort of, you might know already, those clever people that have already looked it up. And
Some people are
because
saying false.
some people are saying false.
You've got a false response, yeah. No,
Okay.
false, false.
False, false, false.
Overwhelmingly false.
So do you think they experience more pain or less chronic pain if it's false?
More is the initial responses. More, more,
Yep, okay.
or
Right.
more.
Actually, that is the correct answer. Okay, so lots of research then. I'm going to read off my sheet now. By the way, on my sheet, I'm down to the last page. So I probably am like on track. Right. But you might not get many. I'm going to try and give you at least 5 minutes questions, so I need to go quickly. Right. How is autistic pain experienced by autistic people? So children, actually, 8.2% of the UK population of children experience chronic pain. I just thought that was like, whoa, that's a lot of children. That's 1 in 10 children. Three, if you've got a classroom full of children, that's 3 children with chronic pain already. I didn't realize that. And that's only the people that have been referred to a chronic pain clinic. So that's not including the children that haven't even told anybody that they're experiencing chronic pain because they don't realize that this isn't normal. Yeah. So of those then, you've got 15%. So the rate is that 15% of autistic children and young people experience chronic pain and are attending chronic pain clinics. Now, they've also done some studies with ADHD as well and compared that with autism. And the children with ADHD had been experiencing chronic pain for much longer than the autistic people. But again, that might reflect that maybe the autistic people, it took them longer before they realized that they were experiencing pain. So we don't really, you kind of have to, when you're looking at research, you have to kind of look at the bigger picture of other things that they might have missed because the researchers weren't autistic or ADHD, so they might not have realized, what's actually going on for us. Okay, so so we talked a little bit about dysautonomia. So that's when the body, you might experience excessive sweating, your heart rate going up at random times. Like POTS is called postural something tachycardia syndrome. It basically what you get dizzy when you stand up. That's basically what that means. And that's to do with the dysautonomia. So when you stand up, you're not supposed to get dizzy. But up to 80% of adults and children experience some form of dysautonomia and hypermobility joint pain, such as symptomatic hypermobility that's linked to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and connective tissue differences. So that's where across your body, the tissues that kind of that link all your skin and all everything in your body. They're just a little bit more elasticated, which is why we tend to have like more issues with our bowels, and like a lot of us have got hiatus hernias and reflux, and from quite a young age as well. And that's why a lot of us have got, we keep like spraining our ankles and things like that. Just because, we're a lot more elasticated. And it's also why a lot of us have much younger looking skin. And I'll give you the example. I am 50 years old, and a lot of people are really surprised by that. But I don't know what the camera's picking up on me today. So, I might look my age today. So I don't know. But actually, so a lot of autistic and neurodivergent people tend to look a lot younger because their skin's a lot more elastic. It's got more collagen in it. So chronic pain then is also linked to sensory processing differences in autism. Now, some really good papers, they're all in the references at the end. So if you do want to look up some of the research, these papers are great, and they're written in a really easy to understand way, actually. So I will encourage you to go and look those up later on. Right. Okay. Behavioral signs of pain. We know this. We know a lot of this already, don't we? That we do see a lot of self-harming, aggression, stimming. So stimming might be, just whatever that person does for the stimming. So the stimming isn't necessarily a sign of their pain. It could be, because they could be stimming because they're just enjoying, like they may enjoy rocking. I'm always fiddling with something. I've got, things that I'm like constantly. I like the way it feels. I like rolling things. Like it's my deep pressure, isn't it? I do that across my legs quite a lot as well, and it really helps with my, what it's doing is it's regulating my nervous system, because actually my body knows that it's experiencing something, and then that's the way that my body is trying to regulate itself.
Jodie, sorry, just to jump in, got your 10-minute warning.
Yep, 10-minute warning. Okay, we are nearly there anyway. So other things, so we might see things like anxiety, withdrawal. We might see changes in sleep patterns or loss of appetite. You know all of this already. Okay. We've already talked about some of the things like delayed reactions, hyperactivity. So these are things you might be looking out for, because I think when you're looking out for these, like quite often we see some of these symptoms, like the hyperactivity, and we think, oh, it's behavioral, but actually a lot of the time it's pain. So like one of the gentlemen that we support has had an increase of aggressive behaviors just recently, and we've just found out that he's suffering with constipation that's so severe that he's had to go to hospital now. But actually, you know it's actually quite common, and people actually die from impaction. So that's why it's really important. I mean, they've done some studies that showed that now I know that we often, when we go to the doctors and the doctor says give them some paracetamol, and we feel like we haven't been heard. But actually, when they did some studies of behavior, and they gave everybody paracetamol, and in 70% the behavior completely disappeared, which suggests to me that actually there's some kind of pain going on. And also the crossover in our brains between emotional pain and physical pain, it's that we actually got a lot of wires that cross over each other. So it's actually really difficult for us to tell whether it's emotional or physical. So actually, for autistic people, it actually is beneficial, like if we're experiencing emotional pain, to take paracetamol or some form of painkiller, because actually it does the same thing for us. It's probably better than taking an antipsychotic or an antidepressant. Okay. So yeah, the other thing is that in chronic pain, it's actually much, much harder for us to locate where the pain is in our body. So we often feel a general sense of, I can't work out whether it's hunger, whether it's pain, whether it's in my ankles or anything. Okay. I've been doing some like body scans recently, and that's actually been helping me to like just to notice, right, where in my body am I feeling tension? Oh yeah, okay, right, I'm feeling it here. Or I do a body scan because I've woken up in the night and I just feel really agitated. And I do a body scan and I'm like, oh, actually, my ankles are really hurting. And that's when I realized, actually, if I rate my ankles pain, because I have arthritis in there, if I rate that pain out of 10, I'm definitely on about a 7 to 8 right now. Okay, but when I woke up, I didn't even realize I had pain. I just thought I was agitated. I thought it was mental health. Yeah. So that's why this is why I keep coming back. Like with my team, I'm just constantly, could it be pain? Could it be pain? Right. Another thing they found with the studies is that biting the wrists here and head banging was also associated with pain. So the head banging and the biting of the hands disappeared when the person was given paracetamol. So I always think it's, if they're doing that, give them paracetamol because you don't know, and it's not actually going to harm them unless they have an allergy to it. That's slightly different. But also another thing, biting here, there's actually pressure points here that does actually release that analgesic. You know what I mean? Makes makes you feel better. Okay, so actually biting there does help. Oh, I've got a phone call now, so I'm not answering it. I'll have to ring him after. Right, let's finish because my taxi will be here soon. Right, I've already told you about hypermobility. We'll send out this later on, or when the video comes out, you can pause it and read it properly. It's on the SEDS Connective website. See on the top right hand side where it's got it looks like a horse, doesn't it? I don't know if it's a horse. It always looks like a horse to me, but
Like a horse.
anyway, it's on their website. So what can we do to help people to express pain? First of all, help them to recognize that they have pain in their bodies to become more self-aware. Okay, so seeing the world through their eyes. So it might be that you start off with some emotions cards, right? And you've got one that's got, that considers pain as well. Which of these things is going on for you? Okay, that can really help. That's my alarm going off saying you've got 5 minutes left. Okay. You've got things like body mapping again. So some people they can locate what's in their body by looking at a map and they can point to things. That works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. But it's also really helpful for those people that are not very good at recognizing things in their body. You can actually tap the body. Not you do it, they do it to themselves, okay? Because we mustn't neuroaffirming practices is actually giving people autonomy to be in control of their own bodies. So, can they tap, does it hurt there? Does it hurt there? Because actually you can feel, or you talk about tension, does it feel tight? And then you can do that with them. Does it feel that's tight? Okay, so let's feel, does that feel tight? Does that feel tight? Does that feel tight? Does that feel tight? Okay, so that's a way we can help them to kind of be aware of what's going on in their bodies as well. Okay. You might do some scaffolding. So like thinking about different things. So remember that list of things that your body does, like your pupils dilating and your heart rate going faster. So we can look at, right, what are your hands? Your hands do they feel wet or do they feel dry? Do they feel sticky? Yeah. Do they feel warm? Do they feel cold? What about here? Let's feel my heart. Is it going fast or is it going nice, or is it nice and relaxed? Yeah. And it's just about that helps people to kind of understand what's going on in their bodies. And you don't do it just when they're experiencing something. You can do these things every day as part of an activity like we do with very small children. We do the head, shoulders, knees and toes song, don't we? But actually we can do the head, shoulders, knees and toes song and then do thinking about any of these things. I wouldn't do them all at once. I'd say, just pick one or two things, and then you can build up concepts over time. Okay. So body scanning, we said you've got rating scales. I love the Lego one, but you can use any, you can adapt your rating scale. I had a Thomas the Tank Engine one for somebody, which is here. Gestalt language is something else that we often need to consider because some people will use other phrases that mean I'm in pain. So a young man that I worked with often said, uh-oh, there's a cow on the track. And that often meant something unexpected is happening in my body and I'm feeling. That was often his way of saying, I'm feeling something here. That I'm feeling anxious and worried. So that was really important, that the way we documented it was so that we knew that that was our warning sign that he might be in pain, or that he might be experiencing some kind of anxiety. So that was really helpful. If you're going to use things like Thomas Tank Engine, don't write down what you think these are. Find out from the person what they think they are. How's Thomas feeling in this picture? And it might be like, because the gentleman that I worked with, when it was the one with Gordon down at the bottom there, because I think it was Gordon was the one that was on the with the cow on the track, he would often say when he was pointing to Gordon feeling like that, he always talked about the cow on the track. So that told us that we could use that image to mean I'm feeling sad or I'm worried about something. I know that isn't what it says on the pictures because I made this years and years ago before I realized that we need to listen to autistic people and what they're saying and use the words that they're using. I just pulled this out and threw it in. Right, okay. I'm not going to go into this, but communication is complex. So we need to think about, is there anything in that person's body language, facial expression, their tone of voice, perhaps, or their body movements that are expressing something? I always use this picture to explain that communication is complex because I think, is she laughing or is she crying or is she sneezing? I don't know. I just Googled picture of person who is laughing, but they look like they're crying. And that's what it came up with. But actually, if we kind of went out in the context and she's in a theatre, we might think that she's probably laughing. Maybe she's gone to see a comedy. But actually, if we zoomed out on that picture and it was in the scene of a disaster, we would assume and infer that she's probably crying. Okay, or at a funeral or something. Well, she could be laughing at a funeral. I don't know. Right, this is the FLAC scale. It's often used with very small children to kind of get a picture of, describing what being in pain looks like for them. I'm not going to go through it now, but we can do this kind of thing for the adults that we support or the children that we support, where we think about what does their face look like? Are they clammy? Do they go pale? Are they smiling less? Are their legs, they're more agitated? Are they pacing up and down? Yeah, so looking at those, you might include things like what the skin's like, their secretions. They might be drooling more when they're in pain. Like, gum pain, you drool a lot more, don't you? Their posture, their body language, their appetite if they stopped eating. Yeah. As the sleep changes or their vocalizations change. So it's really important, if that person can't communicate themselves, that you find ways and you actually look at all of these things and think, right, let's document this. Right, so that's just the same thing. I'm just going to answer this question because I was going to get you to answer, but I'm really aware that my taxi
Oh, I was about to jump in and give you the 1
is
o'clock.
going to be here soon because I've got to go down to Bristol now. So, but there are actually some differences in the way autistic people and non-autistic bodies modulate pain. So how we cope with pain. Okay, so non-autistic bodies, you tend to, because you notice the pain, you're able to regulate your pain. Soft touch, a nice hug are good ways for you to regulate pain. Chronic pain, people often get sent to, for CBT at the, but actually autistic bodies, because we can't shut out and filter out the pain, then CBT is just going to be gaslighting us, because we can't actually filter it out at all. Okay, so what we do need to do then is to engage with our sensory systems in a much more active way in order to help our bodies to regulate and to cope with pain. Okay, so some of those things might be reduce. I mean, again, you know a lot of this stuff already, don't you? We get to have give them less stimulation. You remove them from or remove sensory and social. We might talk with them less, give them some space and time. Educational demands, again, it's if they're in school, they need some time out at this point, because they might still be managing chronic pain as well. Deep pressure, weighted blankets. Heat was another one for pain, because we're actually extra sensitive to heat, but the heat helps us to well, when I saw the physio for my arthritis, they said rub it with a hot pad, and that actually helps to reduce the pain. And I was like, all right, okay, because you guys, you rub something when it hurts, don't you? And that helps you, but it doesn't always help us, you see. So okay, so again, engaging with the sensory system might be finding some of those sensory tools that do help us to calm our nervous systems down, and then that's often the best way to help us cope with pain. Plus the painkillers. Okay, don't underestimate the painkillers. Right, I think that's it. References, and
Amazing.
then you can connect with me if you want to.
That's
That's it.
brilliant.
I'm all done.
Jodie, thank you so much. We do have two very quick questions if you've got
Yep.
30 seconds. And the first one, you're going to have to forgive my pronunciation because I'm probably going to say this wrong. But can you signpost Ruth towards any research around trigeminal neuralgia for people with learning disabilities and or autistic
Oh,
people? Something they've been looking into, but they haven't found a huge amount of information about it.
trigeminal. Is that trigeminal?
Quite possibly. Sorry.
Was it?
Trigeminal.
Yeah, trigeminal. Okay, so that's a trigeminal
That's it.
nerve. Um, you're probably best go asking a physio.
Okay.
But if you do look up some of these references, this one called the Bogdanova paper,
Hmm.
if you just like go on Google Scholar and look up autism and pain, it's a paper that was published in 2022 by Bogdanova.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The only other
And that
question,
was a helpful paper.
that's
So,
brilliant. Thanks, Jodie. The only other question that's been flagged up is, do you have a preference or recommendation of emotion flashcards versus sort of emoji faces versus symbols for working on identification of the names behind emotional pain?
well, personally, I quite like those cards where if you look up emotional ABA emotional flashcards on the Apple App Store,
Mm.
that's where I found those ones.
Brilliant.
Um, and I think you have to, when I downloaded it, it was free, but it's about $6.99 now. Um, you can just use pictures from the internet if you just want to make your own. But you don't have to label them, so you don't teach people this is what happy looks like, this is what sad looks like. Let that person
Yeah.
do it. And also, please don't label in people what you think you're seeing, because speech and language therapists used to recommend and some of them still do recommend, like if you see them they look angry to you, label it as angry, but actually they're not actually angry. They might actually be feeling pain, or what you're seeing is an expression of frustration. So I think it's really important that we find ways to allow people to express their own words and use that. I know
Yeah.
it's really difficult, if they're not non-speaking, it can be difficult, because actually, they might only understand happy and sad really as
Yeah.
emotions. And a lot of people that I work with, that's, happy and sad is all they do. Or
Yes. Yeah.
You know, but again, they might be just doing this. Yes, I'm trying to please you. I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. That is great.
But no, they're not okay. Right.
Jodie, thank
Okay.
you so much. People are putting loads of thank you comments in the chat.
No,
There's
thank
a lot of
you.
people sharing lived experience. I think they've really valued your
Lovely. I'm going
thank
to
you.
have a look at these. Could you do me a favour, Katie, and
Cool.
collate all of that and send it to me? Because I'll probably lose access to it
I will do my best to. Yeah.
after I've gone, because obviously I have to go now to catch my
Yes.
train.
Not
So
a
lovely.
problem. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being great. I'm assuming that you've all been great listeners and you've all been like this listening, which is probably why you channeled it through Katie and brought out all that information from me.
Brilliant.
Right, I
Have
better
a
go.
great journey, Jodie. Thank you very
Yes, we'll
much.
do. Thank you, everybody. And
Goodbye.
connect with me on social media if you want to.